available on YouTube for all our colleagues to listen in, especially from the Asia Pacific, because of the time difference. I think it will be very difficult for them to join. But in any case, thanks, Anne, for letting me speak. So let's just start now. So good afternoon. My name is Tina. I'm the IOE Policy Director. And on behalf of the IOE, I would like to warmly welcome all the distinguished speakers and participants to this important and timely discussion on successful approaches and opportunities to address female representation and leadership roles in business. I would also like to thank the European Union for its financial support and strong commitment to gender equality and women's economic empowerment, which made this initiative possible. So we recognize that despite notable progress in education and employment, women's representation in senior leadership roles remain disproportionately low worldwide, resulting in a loss of talent and potential economic growth. Building on insights from the 2024 IOE conference, which we held in Morocco successfully, Women in Business, we gather here today among peers to learn and exchange practical strategies to enhance women's inclusion in leadership roles. Strategies that have successfully empowered individuals, sustained businesses, and supported our communities. In an era where innovation drives growth and thrives on diversity, women's presence and participation in business and organizations are more than matters of equity. They are vital business advantage in a rapidly changing world of work and a pathway to new opportunities. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Anne Vaucher, the International or European Social Affairs Director, our member employer in France, MEDEF, and chair of the IOE Policy Working Group on Gender Equality and Diversity, for her opening remarks, followed by the moderation of our panel today. Anne, you have the floor. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Tina. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today as we gather to discuss an issue that's not only very timely, but also, of course, critical for our organization, for our economies, and also for our societies, of course. So according to Grant Thornton, in 2024, women make up 42% of the global workforce. However, women in senior management and leadership positions account for just 33% of this workforce. Latin America currently leads with 36% of women in senior roles, followed by North America and the European Union. The World Economic Forum's 2025 Gender Gap Report further shows that from 2015 to 2024, the proportion of women in top management positions increased from 25% to 28%. However, since 2022, momentum has slowed. In many sectors, progress at the top is not matched by advances at mid-levels, creating a fragile pipeline for future leaders. And with the economic uncertainty, it also worsens the situation. LinkedIn data shows that during downturns, fewer women are recruited into leadership positions, primarily because of systemic biases in hiring and also in internal promotion. So let me be clear, very clear. This statistic, of course, emphasizes both a persistent challenge, but also, of course, a tremendous opportunity. The chance to close the gender gap, unlock social economic potential, and also foster a more inclusive vision of leadership, one that reflects the breadth of women's experiences and insight. But of course, to realize this potential, we must move, I would say, from statements to strategy, from promises to action, and I will even say maybe to commitments for some who can take commitment. So this demands clarity on what works and also the courage to acknowledge what does not work. Progress will not come from rhetoric alone, but through very pragmatic, very data-driven, and also deliberate steps. That's why we are here today, and that's why I trust in the leadership of EBMOs, and of course also on the collective will of those in this virtual space and beyond to drive meaningful change. Both research in the last decades, and we say both research and practice consistently show that when women are fully represented in leadership and economic life, innovation flourishes, productivity improves, and new business opportunities emerge across both public and also, of course, private sectors. So the question that we must now answer is, how do we accelerate women's representation in leadership? Given the time, I will emphasize two key priorities. The first one is organization, including, of course, EBMOs, companies, institutions, must acknowledge the importance of this agenda. They must implement concrete strategies, and I will say also measurable actions, policies to nurture leadership policies to nurture leadership pipelines for women. And then that includes mentoring program, succession planning, and targeted opportunities for career growth. As EBMOs, we must invest in skills development, in representation, and structural initiatives that lead to measurable, and I will insist on measurable, outcomes. That's what we'll be focusing on today in our session. And the second key priority, but we won't really discuss that today, is investing in the care economy, expanding access to flexible working arrangement, and addressing the unequal burden of caregiving, because this is essential. Time is one of the most valuable but also limited resources for caregivers, especially women. We need robust, affordable, and accessible care systems that significantly boost the woman's participation and retention in senior roles. The data are clear. Women are currently 55% more likely than men to take extended career breaks, primarily for parenting. And this is, in fact, of course, not just individual careers, but also organizational talent pipelines and national productivity. So this is an imperative to address this point. So in conclusion, and as a representative of employer organization and the wider business community, we recognize that genuine progress requires leadership, collaboration, and a readiness to take risk, of course, and also pursue bold action, particularly in this world shaped by uncertainty and also competing agendas. So today's discussion is about more than just identifying what are the barriers, but it's about unlocking the possibilities that lie ahead by learning from effective initiatives, leveraging private sector practices, and building partnerships. This is also a keyword, partnerships, with stakeholders that can catalyze meaningful change across our respective federation and companies. So I will stop here my introductory remarks and now open the panel session. So I would like to turn to our distinguished panel and speakers who will share on one point a testimony, but also two examples of good practices in harnessing the power of women representation and leadership. And this good example and testimony have successfully moved the needle forward. So I'm happy to welcome three speakers. Miss Sheena Myers-Granville, so Executive Director from the Barbados, Employers Confederation. Miss Emily Dickens, Chief of Staff and Head of Government Affairs as SHRM, and Miss Ines Fontelas, DEI Officer from the MEDEF, the Legal Ethics Governance and CSR Department. So together we will they will offer us a key insight and share their experiences, their challenges, but also their success stories in order to provide for others and for the participants inspiration and also way forward. So let's start this panel session. And so I am pleased to welcome Ms. Sheena Myers-Granville. So Ms. Sheena Myers-Granville, sorry if I do not pronounce well your name. But so Sheena, you hold a master's degree in labor and employment relations and a BCS in management. And over the past 8 years, you have served as the executive director of the Barbados Employers Confederation, becoming the first woman to hold this position. So congratulations, based on your experience, could you please share some of the key challenges in promoting female representation on the path to leadership roles in Barbados? And maybe, and additionally, I will say, what effective practices are EBMOs and businesses implementing to address this challenging and enhance the inclusion, the representation, and leadership opportunities for women? So, Sheena, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anne. And don't worry, I absolutely love to hear my name pronounced in a French accent. It's absolutely fine. So thank you so much for the invitation today and for that question. I'll start out by sharing a bit of context. Promoting female representation in leadership roles in Barbados. It's a familiar challenge, but I also see it as a continuous opportunity. Just a bit about my region. I live in a region that is very much shaped by matriarchal traditions. So Caribbean households have long been led by women. I mean, when I was doing my undergrad, I had to do the book, My Mother Who Fathered Me. That title alone would let you know a bit of our social construct. So historically, women have been central figures in our communities. And today, we actually dominate the educational spaces. So in Barbados and across the Caribbean, we are seeing over 70% of our university graduates as women. But the paradox is still there. Despite these gains, similar to what you mentioned in your opening comments, we don't see women reflected in equal numbers at the highest levels of leadership. So regionally, women hold about 31% of senior management roles and about 23% of executive positions. And the numbers, if you look at in the political arena, is even more stark. So female representation in elected positions is below 30%, and only about 22% hold ministerial posts or cabinet positions in the English-speaking Caribbean. So then the question is, where is the disconnect? Because we have coming out of universities, we overwhelmingly are seeing women receiving their degrees, but we're not seeing them in executive positions and senior leadership. So from my experience, one of the biggest barriers is not ability, but visibility and confidence. So women are doing the work, they're managing teams, they're driving strategy, but they're not always stepping into or being invited to occupy senior leadership roles. And the terminology is now imposter syndrome. That's what I'm seeing playing out. I've heard in conversation too many bright and capable women second guessing if they belong at the top. And one effective approach I've seen firsthand involved early investment in high potential employees. In one organization, we selected 15 standout employees and engaged them in a curated 12-month leadership development program. So while the program did build necessary skills, I think one of the values that the program had was a strong signal to the participants. It told the women who participated, some who never pictured themselves in senior roles, that they're seen, their work is valued, and they can be leadership ready. And I think that kind of affirmation was transformational in terms of how they saw themselves. So they were pulled out, said, hey, we see a bright future for you and we want you in leadership. We also need to double down on mentorship. Think both formal and informal. The power of someone saying, I see you, I believe in you, let's chart the path together is invaluable. When I speak to many executives, based on the conversation, I know that they had a mentor. Most of them unofficially, but the influence is there, the respect they have for that mentor is there. And very often the conversation is how, it's not the technical knowledge, it's how that mentor allowed or helped them to navigate the intricacies of the boardroom, and how that mentor allowed them to manage relationships with senior leadership. And that is where the value came out of that relationship. Because as I said, it's not ability, it's about confidence and visibility. So knowing how to navigate the boardroom, a space that seems so daunting and unfamiliar, gave them a measure of confidence in stepping forward. So Barbados stands out a bit when we look at female leadership. So my president is a female. My prime minister is a female. The director of public prosecutions, the head of our largest trade union, we're all women. But the broader landscape remains uneven. So even though we do have those wins, and so we do see women in leadership, our prime minister is one of only 2 female heads in the entire Caribbean. The second one was only elected this year. So we do still need to close that gap. So from my experience, I'll highlight early indication and support for emerging female talent that helps to build confidence, intentional mentorship and sponsorship networks, because the boardroom is seen as this closed door space. So persons are very unsure of how to navigate that space. And being intentional about workplace cultures that empower women to claim their space with confidence. So I think that we know the talent is here. We know the education, they're attaining it. The challenge and the opportunity is to align the leadership representation with the reality of who's ready to lead. So those are my comments for thought. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sheena, for sharing your views, and also I like very much this focus on the words visibility and confidence, because I think, of course, as you said, they are the most important point, but the most important necessity that we need to take action in order to help a woman, in fact, to increase visibility and confidence, and that are crucial words. So thank you very much. Now I would like to welcome Miss Emily Dickens, so and thank you for my French accent. So Miss Emily Dickens, Chief of Staff and Head of Government Affairs at SHRM. So Emily, as a C-suite executive at one of the world's largest human resources trade association. So you lead the organization's global policy, including the advocacy team, So we could not be in a better position, company, to talk about women in leadership, hence drawing on SHRM's extensive experience. Could you share with us some of the main challenges that women still encounter in gaining representation and leadership roles in the labor market? Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I'd love to double down on what my colleague just said when we talked about all of the inner workings that keep us from ascending to role. So two things. I want to think about, if we talk about something called TAM, those of you in the business world, it's called the total addressable market. And we think about every woman in the world being part of this total addressable market of talent that could ascend into these top roles. And so what I'd also like us to do is realize that every woman in the world doesn't want to be in the top role. And so we have a much smaller total addressable market than we think about the number of women who actually want to take on these leadership roles. And I think there's another group of women who love being in that role where you are advising the leader because the power of influence is so great depending on those roles. So I think we have a smaller market of people who we're trying to target here who really want to be in C-suite leadership roles. And so we start there with a smaller number, and then we look at what are the inside out things that are keeping them from these roles. And I think we heard what my colleagues say, the lack of confidence in thinking you can do this, the lack of putting yourself in positions to be seen. And I will take that a step further. The lack of using judgment around your choices, personal and professional, as it relates to work-life integration, is one of the key things we're seeing. You mentioned earlier about caregiving pressures and how the majority of women tend to be the ones who are doing caregiving. So women remain more likely to shoulder these caregiving responsibilities. And according to our data, 35% of women managers with caregiving duties report pandemic-related career setbacks compared to 26% of men. So there's a double burden. So you have to decide early on your choices when you're deciding whether to take on these additional burdens and to look into these roles. And if you've decided that you want to do both and you think you can do both, you're going to have to carefully structure a lifestyle based on not work-life balance, but work-life integration. And so I'd love to focus on speaking from inside out, because here's the thing, we can only control so much by law and policy, especially in various organizations that are run by boards and other external people. And as much as we've seen the efforts here in the United States and globally for people who are trying to get more women in leadership roles, we have to make sure we are ready when the opportunity comes, and that some of the barriers and challenges that we could have gotten around, that we are not the reason why we didn't get around that barrier and challenges. So it's one thing to talk about the things that externally hold you back, but you also want to make sure that you've addressed all of the internal things over which you have control. So we talk about this concept of work-life integration. And as you make your choices throughout your career, understanding the repercussions of those choices and ensuring you have the networks and support to make sure that if you make a choice that makes you a parent, a caregiver, a spouse, or whatever it is that you think could be a barrier, that you have the resources around you to assist you as you're working your way up that pipeline. Because what we're seeing here is a lot of dependence on employers to solve the problems related to personal choices. And while we all believe in public-private partnership, and there is a role for employers to play, employers cannot solve all of the issues for all of the people who we'd love to see in these roles. That takes a lot of self-introspection, and it takes a kind of, it's that moment where you're like, wow, yes, I do have power here. So I want you all to exercise your power in terms of your choices. The other piece is making sure you have networks, both professional and personal, that can assist you on your journey. that personal network is actually going to come in handy more than you think. I love to tell the story of a woman that during COVID, she had a lot of work obligations, but she had friends who had children the same age as hers, who 13 years prior, she made a decision to invest in those friendships because she knew they would all have children the same age. And if they had needs and needed assistance with childcare and things of that nature, that they would be able to lean on one another. Well, COVID happens and she's got to give speeches virtually. And so in partnership with those parents and those relationships that she invested in her personal network, there were days when some of the mothers took all of the children and then those women were able to continue to work and do what they needed to do. That was a very long-term plan if you think about it, but it was her consciously deciding early on that once they made the choice to have a family and to be a certain type of professional, that they were going to make sure they had the personal networks to do that. We're seeing here in the States, people are lonely, don't have the family connections that they used to have. And so it's incumbent on us to make sure where we have relationships that can help us in our times of need, that we nurture those relationships. And then lastly, I want to talk about sponsorship. People talk so much about mentorship, but sponsorship is something you've got to be open to as well. So are you putting yourself in places and in front of the faces of people who could potentially help sponsor your career? This means sometimes going outside of your comfort zone and going to events and going up to people and introducing yourself and talking to them about that. It does push you outside of your circles, and it should push you outside of the circles that you typically know. If you are in education, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be going to events in other industries and getting to know other people who could help guide you and put you in places, especially when you think about how people are engaged in board service and have really large networks. And so I would say the best thing, mentorship is great, but having someone that moves the pieces on the chessboard, that knows someone that will create a role for you, that knows someone that will put you in a role as a trial period so you can show what you can do, that's important as well. But you've got to be around people who have the power to help you in that way. And that means going outside of your comfort zone. And so while we have lots of data and absolutely agree about the unequal access, about the underrepresentation, I go back to my first point is we've got a smaller pie of people who are actually interested in these roles than we think, which isn't a bad thing, because I think that means that we can get more people into these roles sooner if we think about this. But number two, understanding that we've got to make sure our work-life integration plan is something we're continuously working on so that we're not creating the barriers ourselves. And then number three, putting ourselves in places and in front of faces that could become where we could find the sponsors that can help move us along in our careers.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emily, for sharing this concept of work-life integration. Very interesting, and also focusing on the necessity of having networks, of course, but also sponsorships. Very interesting. Thank you. And now, and now I would like to welcome Ines Fontelas, so DEI officer in the Legal Ethics, Governance and CSR department at MEDEF. Ines also master in international public management and an advanced diploma in gender studies. For the past 7 years, she has been working on CSR issues, including gender diversity and equality. And before she starts, let me just say that for those who may not know MEDEF, because we are working for the same organization, MEDEF is the leading employer organization in France, representing more than 240,000 member companies, employing more than 12 million employees, workers, across all sectors of the economy, and including, of course, present also in overseas territories. This organization is actively, for the last, but maybe Ines will told that, actively committed to promoting gender equality, particularly in terms of gender diversity within leadership bodies and initiatives to enhance companies' inclusive practices. So Ines, can you share with us what prompted the MEDEF to launch its gender diversity initiative, how the idea originated and unfolded?
Thank you very much, Anne, and thank you very much, Tina and Alice, for the invitation. So yes, Anne, as you said, at MEDEF, we deeply think that gender diversity is a strategic driver for innovation, competitiveness, but also performance. And actually, our idea was to identify and support, as Emily said, in networks, talented women in accessing leadership roles in companies, but also to represent business voices in employers' organizations. So at first, MEDEF actively promoted the development of equal representation and gender representation within board of directors back in 2010, actually, because in France we implemented quotas, actually gender quotas in governing bodies as soon as 2011, and at MEDEF we promoted it softly within companies even years before. So it changed business cultures regarding the representation of women at the higher level. So that was our first commitment to actually support gender representation. And back in 2019, we decided to lead by example, thinking that if we represent business leaders, we should represent all business leaders and including women leaders. So we needed to increase the gender diversity within our own governing bodies and within the governing bodies of our sector federations, but also all the territorial organizations that we represent. So what we did is that we at first adopt raison d'être, as we say in French, which is like a mission statement, a mission that drives all our actions. And this raison d'être is to act for a responsible growth, meaning a diverse growth also. So at the same time, in 2019, we decided to implement a gender diversity charter, meaning that we set our own goals of gender representation. We wanted to reach 30% of women within our leadership bodies. Why 30%? Because in France, there are 30% of women leaders, meaning women entrepreneurs. So we wanted to represent the real economy in France and represent all business leaders, and that's why we set this target. And what we saw is that I think 6 years later, we managed to actually reach 30% of women within our governing bodies. We actually represent more than I think 30% of women business leaders within all our territories, which means that that this diversity was successful, and also maybe, and I'll go back later to all the actions we did, because as you said at first in your introductory remarks, we made a commitment at first 6 years ago, but it translated in a lot of actions, including creating a women's network to inspire, to support, and to promote women leaders within our organization.
Thank you so much, Ines. And yes, indeed, it's true that we are in a country also where we have a lot of legislation on this topic. It's not the case. It's not the case in all member states and in all the states, but it's true that it's helping to push in the direction. We'll come back on that maybe later. Thank you very much. So now I will go back to Emily for a second round of questions. And before I forgot to say that to all participants that of course if they have to raise questions, they can put it in the chat. I think that we will come back just after the second round of questions. We will come back on the question in the chat. And so for the second round of question, Emily, Could you come back maybe on the type of specific actions that companies are taking or should take, I would say, to promote women's participation in leadership and decision-making roles? And what success stories have emerged from these efforts?
Great, thank you. So here's the good thing. Wanting to retain the top talent that you have is important. And so investing in the internal mobility of people who you already have in your organization and creating programs that don't cost much, that talk about providing them the skills and other training that will help move them into leadership roles. You all know one day you're an individual contributor, the next day you're a people manager. Are they receiving proper training on becoming a people manager so that they know how to leverage the skills that they have and they can continue to move up the line in that organization? And so we're seeing that all groups, and again, not just doing it just for women, because the workplace won't be just women. So doing targeted programming of mixed groups of people who may typically be bypassed in succession planning. So make that the common denominator. Formalizing mentorship and sponsorship programs. I don't know about you, but we hire people and everybody gets a buddy, right? That starts at that initial level when you join the organization, but continuing that buddy motif within your organization as people move up into managerial and leadership roles, critically important. And then our research shows that 49% of women with a mentor or a sponsor feel motivated to push through any adversity or barriers that they encounter throughout the course of making their way through an organization when they do have this support. And this is across all job levels. We've seen organizations that have done this, a leading mining company in Indonesia who's developed this type of targeted sponsorship cohorts. So doing them in groups of cohorts and then match those high potential leaders with senior executive advocates. So then getting that person internally. So internally is always important. And then the other thing is using and leveraging data to understand where your gaps are within your organization. Data is so incredible, and having accountability. So I tell people every time as a people manager, every time I hire anyone new on my team, I do a pay audit. It doesn't matter, right? Because you're not hiring every day, depending on where you are. But anytime you're adding a new person to your team, conducting your own pay audit, determining whether what you're going to offer this person will impact greatly someone who's been here for a number of years, and whether this is an opportunity to either promote someone internally or an opportunity to adjust someone's pay, because market pay sometimes has not kept up with internal pay. And so as leaders in the organization, promoting pay audits, not just once a year or every few years, but every time you're adding someone new, and then rewarding those executives who are taking that time to do that. And then again, in performance reviews, asking the individuals what type of growth and development they would like to see, and funding those things that may not directly align with their current jobs, but could align with jobs in the future in that organization and elsewhere. Again, that's clearly part of the retention, because the easiest thing for an organization is to take the individuals who are already there, who know the organization and know its culture, and help to elevate them into leadership. And so internal targeted programs, and then data and accountability related to that data to understand that people are being paid well on their way up. And that, again, that they're having access to senior leadership, and senior leadership is paying attention to the issue.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emily. And I fully agree with the point on particularly, with everything, but particularly the point on data. I think it's crucial, I think. Coming back to Ines. So Ines, in order to enter into more details, maybe what specific actions did the MEDEF undertake to implement this gender diversity charter, and what results have been achieved? And furthermore, based on this experience, could you share at least two pieces of advice for other EBMOs, aiming to enhance female representation and leadership within their organization.
Thank you, Anne. So, as I said, to translate our gender diversity commitment to achieve economic parity, so 30% of women within our governing bodies, we took concrete steps, and I think I can summarize it in 3 pillars, which maybe could also be the pieces of advice you were asking for. The first one is the visibility. So we introduced gender balance presidencies of every committee or governing body we have at MEDEF. So for instance, we have different committees and commissions which are tackling different themes and different topics at MEDEF. For instance, we have like, I don't know, like the tax committee, we have the inclusion committee where we tackle diversity and gender equality, for instance, but we have a lot of committees, and each committee is actually have a male president and a female and a woman president, so that every time we are asked to have to take part in, for instance, panels or press interviews, or even go on negotiations with the public authorities, we can send both a man and a woman for women leaders to be completely visible. So that's the first action we implemented. The second one is transparency. So actually each year we publish an annual review of our gender diverse or gender diversity charter. So we actually monitor the proportion of women within each governing body of our national organization, but also in each sector federation. But also, as I said, we have also organization in each French territory. So we monitor it and we see which are the bodies, the governing bodies where the representation of women is increasing, but also the ones where the representation of women is decreasing. So where we need to put more efforts. And we actually presented our latest one last week during our General Assembly. We present it to our members, but we also publish it online in an effort of transparency so that everyone knows what is the representation of women within our bodies. And the last pillar is actually providing support. So as I said, we launched at the same time as our gender diversity charter, we launched a women's network. At first it was launched at the national level, and the idea was to gather all the women leaders already involved in our organization, for them to share best practices, but also obstacles they face, and also for them to open the door to other women and to inspire other women to join our organization. 6 years later, we now have more than 35 networks within the French territory, and each of these network gather between 50 to 100 women leaders through sectors, and it represents all sizes of companies. And so the idea of this network is that they help women step into leadership and representative roles for us, both at the local and national levels. It also fosters a community of women who can provide mutual support and also share personal and professional experiences. We also offer coaching, support, and mentoring for women leaders, for them to be able to access, for instance, we have employer mandates, meaning that they can represent business leaders at both the local and national levels. So we want them to raise their voices, actually, and also for them to inspire other women to join our organization. So each territorial network is completely independent, so they can organize conferences, but also lunches, where they can organize events where actually men are also invited. It depends on the event, but sometimes women, they need to be only together. And then also when we want to actually provide visibility to women leaders at the local level, we wanted to also invite men because they are allies to actually reach gender equality and women representation. So that's what we implemented at the national level. What we do is that we support these territorial networks. We provide content. As Emily said earlier, we can attract women to this position, but we need to make sure that all the obstacles have been removed before. And so we also tackle a lot of gender equality topics, such as you said, the work-life. You didn't say balance, you said integration, but we also tackle questions such as the women representation in, for instance, scientific fields or industrial sectors. We also tackle topics of removing sexual and sexist violence at the workplace. So that's a lot of topics we tackle within our territorial and national level. So as I said earlier, all these pillars, or the 3 pillars, and all these actions have encouraging results. So we now have more than 30% of women in most of our national governance bodies. We have more than 40% of women representing business leaders in employers' mandate at the national level. And we also have more than 45% of women representing territorial and sectoral organizations at the French, within the French territories and our French our organization. So our advices based on MEDEF's experience will be to lead by example, actually, to inspire companies to actually engage in and develop actions to foster women representation, and also create inspiring and supporting communities, because we actually have a lot of women leaders saying that they feel isolated, either within their sector, but also within their territory. And with these women networks, we actually provided them with a support community. And that's why we think that's what helped them to actually take responsibilities within our organization.
Thank you very much, Ines. I know how much you are involved in all these initiatives and that are more and more important, and that with very good results. Thank you so much. I don't know at this stage if Sheena, maybe you would like to reflect on what you heard from Emily or from Ines regarding their experience and context. I don't know if you want to react before opening the floor to question or to reaction. I don't know if you want to intervene.
I can react briefly.
Yes, please.
I will say that based on the conversation and the information shared, it just reinforces the power of network, personal and business. So women in leadership do need that personal network. If it's family, then that's great. But if it's not, then you have to curate that network that provides the support that allows you to then step into spaces. And I would say from where I sit, sometimes persons need a little push in terms of how to go about that building that network, and especially on the business side. So Emily, I liked your comment in terms of attending industry events, not necessarily in your industry, but stepping outside of the box. That is very critical. And I know, internally for my team, I gave them one rule. I said, when you go to an event, you have to speak at least once. And it might seem simple. Sometimes you just need to encourage persons to start small. So you pose at least one question, then you're more comfortable posing more. Or if you go to an event, you must be able to report that you met 2 people. You don't have to network with the entire room, but you build that confidence so that they're then out there building their network. So the power of network is clearly coming out in this conversation this morning. So I'll pause there, Anne, and hand back over to you for your engagement.
Yeah, thank you so much. And maybe I have a last short question for you 3. You mentioned every speaker mentioned different tools, different initiatives, but have you seen new tools, new tools available to support the business community in closing the gender gap? I don't know. Do we have, we can consider artificial intelligence. I don't know, something new that you have seen in the last months or years that could be also recommend or good things to share. Maybe not, I don't know. Maybe the tools that we discussed that you presented or the initiatives, I mean, are already very interesting, but it just, have you seen something new appearing?
So
Yes.
I'll add that one of the things, and you mentioned this earlier, so I want to, sometimes you say things 3 times, people will get it. Normalizing support for caregivers. And you're seeing employers, because it's not a costly undertaking, if you think about it. And what I always tell people is we talk so much about what large businesses can do. So you can hear a Google or Microsoft be able to do things, but the majority of our businesses in this world are small and mid-sized businesses. So being able to provide support for their caregivers in different and unique ways that assist them in their businesses and retaining their talent are important. And even getting your HR professionals to provide information about adult daycare. There's been so much focus on childcare, which in some countries, that is where you see the most of the caregiving issues. But in countries with older populations, you're seeing people who are taking care of children and parents. And they need solutions for how to care for their parents who are now living with them or who are living alone but providing care and need someone to provide care. So you're hearing people talk to their staff about how can we assist you in your caregiving responsibilities. That's not a question that was being asked prior to COVID. And even 2 years after COVID, we are now hearing, you heard in the US presidential elections, in the midst of all the other things that were going on when the vice presidential candidates were debating, caregiving came up. There is this question, and it's caregiving for older adults and for older and for parents that came up, because that's where we see the growth, because people are living longer. So I would say normalizing that within your organization, and for you all who are caregivers, talking about it. If you're a leader in your organization and you are a caregiver, I think you're hearing more leaders share their stories so that their staff will share their stories so that it can become a priority for their organization. And if we address that issue, I think that is one way to get to just get some relief on one of the challenges that we continuously see for women moving up in the workplace.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very interesting. And I must say that a few years ago already, very few French multinational companies developed share and care policies addressing that. But it's a very limited number of companies. But I agree that since the COVID and with the demographic complicated situation that we are facing in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, it will be more and more crucial to address that. I don't know if there are, Tina, just let me know, because I think we are just on time. If there are...
Yeah, I don't see any questions specifically in the chat, but I do see a hand raised by John Smith from ITC-ILO, the training arm of the ILO. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a very fascinating discussion. Thank you. And I just wanted to share also, so I'm coming from the ITC-ILO. That's a very long abbreviation for the training center of the ILO. We're based in Turin. And I see some of the people like Sheena. She's a big fan of us, and we're a big fan of theirs. Anyways, we work with a lot of employers organizations around the world. That's what my team is doing. And a few years back, we have developed a training program, or it's a training and coaching program. It's called Malkia. And I was listening with great attention to the discussion and thinking that precisely the issues on confidence, on visibility, and on networking where come so much to the fore when we do these courses, Malkia, which are for it's a training coaching program for mid-level managers, especially those who become people managers, because it's the change from being a specialist in an area to being a manager of a team that seems to, in our experience at least, bring to the fore many issues of bias, of discrimination, and of changing of role, which might be difficult for women in some organizations. So we are working with them on that. I would just wanted to say that in terms of networking, for example, of course, you have the ones that are internal to your organization, and Sheena and others also mentioned the ones where you go out of your organization. In our experience, it can be also very far away, because a number of people realize doing courses like with the ITC-ILO that even if you might be in I don't know, in the Caribbean and in Asia, your local context and your demographic situation might be different, but still you have a lot of issues in common as a woman manager. And that's also a powerful thing that we experience in our courses. And I think working in employers' organizations, the way these organizations are relatively flat and small, but care for a lot of different members, especially small and medium-sized members, is a very common thread. So I was very interested in the discussion here, and if you allow me, Tina, I'll just put in the chat some information on the next Malkia courses, so that everybody that wants to apply, because we also have fellowships for employers organization. So some of you might be interested, so I'll just put that in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeanne, for sharing that with us. And now I pass the floor to Tina. Thank you for the conclusion.
Thanks, Anne, and thank you, colleagues. It was just a very nice, candid conversation with a lot of rich information that we can all take back and bring back to the federations and the organizations. I think there's a lot of learnings there that we can share. So thank you so much to Sheena, Emily, and of course, Ines, for sharing those practical, concrete results. I won't attempt to summarize, but I just wanted to just pick out on some points which you rightly raised. And Sheena, you mentioned about imposter syndrome. I think we're not talking about it enough, but every woman has, I mean, most of the women that I speak to that are already there at the highest level, they have this. And I'm hearing that also from our female leaders, our female CEOs in the different regions. They also highlighted in how the mentorship and in Emily's case also the proposal to have sponsorship can really help bring out the confidence and the visibility that you need. You mentioned about how a mentor could also help you navigate the boardroom. That's something that you don't learn from school, right? School doesn't teach you how to do that. So these kind of skilled advice, experienced advice can be really, really useful. And I think that's something that we should continue. The IU, of course, has our own mentorship program. We're in the second phase. And I think I see some colleagues here online that have benefited from that. That could be also be useful. And then Emily, thanks a lot also for your points, and colleagues also mentioned about the sponsorship, which I think is really, really crucial, because it's not just someone mentoring you, but someone also pushing for you to do well, someone who's vocal about it, and someone who can, as you say, move the pieces on the chessboard. That could be really help. And I really believe the buddy system that you mentioned, Emily, can really help. If I didn't have a buddy when I joined IUE, it was Alessandra, my colleague, who already left the IUE. I wouldn't have been able to navigate. It's those informal learning, that peer-to-peer learning, that can really help you navigate in your first year, at least in something in the organization you just joined. And I agree with you, we need to normalize the support for caregivers. I think there is some stigma in some regions when it comes to, taking care of, older parents or older siblings or someone who's much older than you. So I think we should also highlight that, at least in our policy discussions and international level. And that's something that we'll be happy to also promote, to make sure that we have enough conversation to look after also our silver economy, as the ILO puts it. And for Ines, thank you so much. And this is we're very proud to showcase MEDEF's initiative, because this is something that's really, really progressive in terms of really changing the structural points. I mean, these are structural changes. You mentioned male-female presence. That's just one of the examples. You mentioned about the charter. The territorial support, I think, is so important. So basically, MEDEF is just not, you're really walking the talk. So I think this is something that we will continue to share, making sure that we reach our targets, because if we don't have a target or a quota, unfortunately, no matter what we do in terms of policy or legislation, it won't really work. We need to change that that culture, right? The way we approach gender equality. So more and more, we're hearing federations believing in setting targets and making sure that women have a seat at the table. So I stop here, and I just want to thank all the speakers, and thank you, Anne, for taking the leadership role as our chair and our gender equality working group. And from my side, just to thank Annalise, Elodie, and Diego, who is supporting us today. And Annalise, of course, who's been taking care from A to Z, the logistics and the substantive part of this event. Thank you. And thanks, John, for sharing the Malkia tool. We encourage colleagues to look at the link that John shared, because we're hearing positive feedback also from our federation who participated in this course. Back to you, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tina, and thank you to the IOE team, and particularly Annalise and Emily, and thank you to all speakers and participants. Have a nice evening, day, afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks.